Good evening, everybody, evening members, officers. Welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee. We don't have any members of the public, so I don't need to direct people to where the facilities are, because most of you will know. If I begin with declarations of interest, do any members have any interest they wish to declare? Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. It was just in relation to agenda item 4. This is on my register of interest. I'm a trustee of York Museums Trust. There are some references to cultural economy and those sorts of things, and I might feel that I want to ask some questions around those aspects. I don't think there's anything that would in any way be a conflict, but I just wanted to be very open about that.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. Just in the interest of transparency, for item 4, I am the nominee for Deputy Mayor for the Combined Authority. I don't think there's anything in the agenda that goes anywhere near the remit of the Deputy Mayor, but just in the interest of transparency, I just wanted to ensure it was declared.
Thank you. Any other members? No? Thank you. In terms of apologies, I've had apologies from Councillor Whitcroft, who is substituted by Councillor Taylor. So welcome, Councillor Taylor. And I think a couple of members may be running a bit late, so they will hopefully join us at some point shortly. The next agenda item is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of May. Do any members have any matters of accuracy with those minutes? No? Oh, yeah. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. I think there's a point in the minutes that say I left the meeting, and then after that point, I also seconded a proposal from Councillor Healy. I don't think I left the meeting. I mean, I was definitely here when I seconded the proposal, but I didn't leave the meeting early, I don't think, last time.
It may have been a different councillor may have had to leave early, but we can make sure that's corrected.
I mean, I'm good, but I'm not that good. You know?
Yeah, the power of telepathy. Yeah, we can correct that. There were a few actions arising from the minutes in terms of, particularly in relation to the schedule of petitions and council motions, which I'm sure we don't need to discuss again, but will hopefully be picked up in time for the next time we look at those reports. It was useful to have that discussion. Agenda item 3, public participation. We have no registrations from members of the public to speak today, which takes us on to the one substantive item on the agenda, which is pipeline of projects for the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority. So this is the start of a series of discussions that will be held across the council scrutiny committees, beginning with this committee and ending with this committee next month. So this is our opportunity through this committee and other scrutiny committees to review the initial list of pipeline projects that have been developed, to provide comments and feedback to assist officers as they finalise that list. So what I propose we do today is try and focus on the areas that this committee has responsibility for, primarily major projects, climate change, noting the fact that the other committees will focus in more detail on the aspects of the pipeline list that are within the remit of those committees. So I don't want to duplicate the work that the other committees will be doing, but obviously as the committee that has an overview of scrutiny, I think we do have a role in terms of making any observations about the list in terms of any gaps or any obvious omissions that members feel they want to raise for consideration by the individual scrutiny committees. So I don't propose to do a line-by-line discussion of all of the items, because I say that would duplicate what the other committees will be doing. But I do want to give members the opportunity to make some early comments and observations that hopefully will inform the discussions that will be taking place over the next few weeks. So with that, I'll hand over to officers to introduce the paper and set the scene. I'll then invite members to ask any questions of officers. Councillor Douglas, is there any observations you wish to make? Then obviously you're welcome to do so. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. So we've brought to you today the proposed York pipeline of projects that we propose presented to the Mayor for them to consider investing in. As you know, the mayoral elections took place in May and we have a new mayor. Prior to that, we recognised that the combined authority presented a huge and unique opportunity for York, and that we needed to work together across the council to basically consider how we best represent York's interests to the mayor once elected. The proposed pipeline in front of you, Annex A, has been developed with officers across the council, and I'll shortly hand over to Sam Blythe to talk you through the process that led to the actual pipeline itself, or the draft pipeline. It's a list of potential projects that would be suitable for investment cases, business cases. We looked at the council plan itself, and you'll see the numbers from the council plan, the actions listed in the Annex A. We looked at the 10-year strategies and the proposed regional framework from the Mayoral Combined Authority, and looked at and considered of those actions in the council plan, which would be deliverable within the 4-year period, but also, more importantly, which would be scalable to consider for regional benefit as well as York benefit. It's worth noting, since we put this, the draft pipeline together, Annex A, we mapped it to the regional framework that was approved by the Combined Authority in March. Since the mayoral election, understandably and of course expectedly, the Mayor has had a review of the regional framework, and you'll see between paragraphs 15 and 16, a slightly revised version of the regional framework. And as it stands, we haven't mapped the draft pipeline to the new slightly changed regional economic framework, but we will have done so by the time we come back to you, I'm going to say early July. So for now, I'm just going to hand over to Sam Blythe, Corporate Policy and City Partnerships Manager, to talk through the process that led to the pipeline before we open it up for questions, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks. So in terms of the development of the pipeline, this began with internal officer consideration, cross-directorate, so bringing together a group of policy leads to discuss how our council plan and our ambitions in the 10-year strategies would fit with potential opportunities at a mayoral combined authority level. So a series of workshops were held. Pipeline in its embryonic form was then run through with the corporate management team, and there was also informal discussions with executive members. In addition to this, we've hosted a city partnership event which took place at the beginning of May. While not specifically to do with the pipeline itself, it considered about the opportunities that might present themselves between for York at a combined authority level. Feedback is reflected in paragraph 21 of the report, predominantly around how we could establish the right conditions to enhance quality of life in the city. As you said, Chair, the next step for this pipeline is to go through the different scrutiny committees starting tonight, then health, housing and adult social care on Wednesday, then additional meetings at the end of the month, and then returning to this meeting in early July before opportunity for leader consideration in July as well. So it's kind of a process we're going through. Hopefully get some really interesting feedback tonight, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. Just one technical question. The rows on the table that are shaded green, are they the quick win items, or does it mean something else?
No, you're quite right. There's the quick win items. We've already developed business cases for them, and they're already with the Mayor, either under consideration or being funded.
Thank you very much. So members, what I propose we do is So I'll take each of the themes in turn, beginning with great places for all. So specifically looking for any comments on climate change and major project related items which are within the remit of this committee, or any more general observations on what we see here, in particular any gaps or any project descriptions that perhaps could be tightened up or improved in some way. So who would like to get the ball rolling? Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. This might be me missing something very obvious, but is it deliberate that there's no sort of figures attached to the various proposals? And when can we expect figures to emerge? Because otherwise it's difficult to, I mean, we can still make judgments, but there's a limit, it limits the way that we can apply, doesn't it? Sorry.
So it's more to do with mayoral funding and what's available and when. So to give you an example, I'm going to say last month, actually, I think it might have been last week, the Combined Authority approved £1 million spend on town centre plans, of which we have since found out that Acomb and Haxby are included in that £1 million. But of that £1 million, £50,000 is being given to Haxby and Acomb. So we're being asked, what can you do with £50,000 for Acomb and Haxby master plans? And so it's not a case of necessarily how much do we want. Sometimes it's how much is available.
So it's a case of having, so we're setting out what could be achieved, and then in however phased, and then taking advantage of whatever money does become available. Councillor Ryan.
Thanks. Just off the back of that, then, will you be doing scale proposals for each of these then? Because it's very difficult to prioritise. So that Acomb one, for example, something that's £1.5 million might be a high priority. A £50,000 project might not be a high. So if you scale, are you saying, right, well, actually, for each of these, we're going to say, right, if we get full amount, that's what we can deliver. If there's only 50,000 available, that's what we can deliver. If there's somewhere in the middle.
So at this stage, we will certainly do that once we have obviously the funding approved and we understand how much funding we can have for the projects. At this stage, we're just really asking, are these the projects that you would want us to pursue getting any funding for? And at this stage, we don't have clarity around how much funding we can have.
Okay. Councillor Widdowson, then Councillor Crawshaw.
Listening to it that way round feels a bit strange. So there is a huge long list of all sorts of different things in here, of which I know some of them have been on the list for 18 months, 2 years, and do have figures against them. Because we've done this once before all the mayoral elections. I would have thought we'd want to say what we want, first of all, not what's available and what can we bid against. So have we got in here, I mean, specifically, there are 5 projects like dualling, LED light, station frontage, those ones. There are 5 very specific things that this list says it is going to do. Then there's a lot of strategies. So have we got a list of the 5, 3, 10 projects that we must do as a city that we see as an absolute priority, to then go to the mayor and say, this is the funding we want, rather than say, this is the funding that's available, this is what's going to spill down, and this is what you deal with? It just feels a little bit the wrong way round to me.
Do you want to comment?
Probably a really mixed picture. So we've had a transport settlement, as you know, and that transport, we know some of you talked about outer ring roads, some of those schemes are costed up. Some of those schemes aren't costed up, but we might wish to bid for some of the transport settlement. And by you all telling us, yes, we want to bid for that particular scheme, that will help us unlock the work we need to do to get on with the business case that will tell us exactly how much of the funding. But we wouldn't expect all the funding for all of the schemes listed in the Annex A. We would expect to sort of bid for amounts over the next 4 or 5 years. So Haxby Station, We know we're on with it. We know we've got work to do on it. We know how much it costs at the stage we've got to, but we haven't got the costings yet for building it out in its entirety and the active transport routes that would connect to it and all of the kind of scaffolding infrastructure that would sit around it. But you might tell us that we need to focus on that. So that's one of the things that we'll take from the scrutiny committee.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Melly.
Yeah, is it right if I ask a supplementary if we've moved on from Great Places for All?
No, we're still on Great Places for All, if we can stick to that, please. But we'll, yeah, hold the thought and we'll come back. So, as I said, we're starting by questions on Great Places for All. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. Just an observation, I suppose, and then a question. And just in that very first line of the Our City Centre, where it talks about a great place for all, which fully maximises the economic potential as the key urban centre. And actually reading some of the things below that, it suggests that it's about economy, but also the social and cultural potential. It may just be a wording thing, but it feels to me quite important that we keep social and cultural high in the thinking as well as economic, because I think otherwise you end up with very different drivers, and particularly in York, where there is always that bit of tension as to who's the city centre for and all of those sort of things. I think keeping that social and cultural potential sort of front and centre is really important. There's then a couple of lines just a little bit further down that front page about decarbonising and adapting new and existing infrastructure. And I understand in terms of developers and, how large developments come out, there's always that tension between future proofing and what you can do, now and in the future. And I would imagine that we have enough checks and balances to make sure that this isn't just seen by developers as an opportunity to get out of their own obligations and get some money from here. But within the existing infrastructure, I wondered really whether there was opportunity for some of the buildings that we have in the city and some of the infrastructure that we have to bid into this, to look at retrofitting, whether it's insulation, but also, and this is where my York Museum Trust hat goes on for a second, some of the buildings that are big open spaces that are very hard to heat and perhaps have some fairly key structural things going on. I know the Theatre Royal, for example, wants to go to LED lighting. All of those sort of things potentially would come under that, but it doesn't seem to be spelled out quite as explicitly as I might hope it would be.
Yeah, no, that's helpful feedback. Councillor, is there anything you want to say in response, or you've noted that and you'll reflect it in the next iteration? Okay, Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers. So it's a very extensive list, and when you see it covered, it clears it up slightly. As with any list of pipeline, it's a dynamic document. It's going to change probably from yesterday to today till tomorrow. And given that this is primarily around mayoral funding, I'm just curious as to how many of these projects on this kind of wish list will wholly depend on mayoral funding, and how many of them would be helped to be completed with mayoral funding. In other words, it would be helpful for me to have to be defined that we need mayoral funding for this to happen. This one will happen. It'd be great if we get mayoral funding. It's going to happen anyway, but under the auspices of CYC. That's my first point. And then just my second point, which I think is under a great place to live. On page 20, under tourism and cultural offer, develop a West York and North Yorkshire tourism or cultural offer that attracts tourists to move between the two areas. Am I reading that you're looking at just the west of York, so the east of York is abandoned, or is that West Yorkshire? Are we looking at three combined? I'm just curious as to what that means, because it very quickly slipped in there, but to understand what it is. And because I represent an East Yorkshire ward, which has a tremendous amount to offer for culture and tourism. Thank you, Chair.
if we can pick that point up when we get to that section of the list, I think that's under the productive and innovative economy, where we can. So I'll beautifully colour coded so we can we know which list we're on. No, that's fine. Don't worry about it. No, we'll make sure we come back to it. So in terms of the point around, which I think is well made around sort of dependencies between different funding sources, I suppose funding opportunities may appear that we're not currently aware of, but I suppose is that something that could maybe be reflected in terms of currently part funded by City of York Council, but could be developed or expanded with mayoral and or other funds?
Yeah, we can bring that back next time we meet. So
Yeah.
street lighting is an example, isn't it? So we've had some net zero funding for some of the street lights, but not all of the street lights. So we can indicate where we've had funding and where this is an additionality.
Yep. Councillor Widdowson?
Just building on the street lighting one. There is also a very simple business case for the street lighting one because it straightforwardly saves us money. So I'm going back to my first point. I'm concerned that we will not be doing projects because we're waiting for money to come when actually we do have the rationale and the business case to do it off our own back. And there are certain projects that we should just be getting on with. How do you separate those out from this list? Instead of thinking all the time, the way that this is presented, we're just waiting to see if we're going to be given the money.
Yeah, I understand. So we'll give you another column which indicates ones that are in train, if you like, hoping for more money, but will continue without, and those that will wait for different types of funding and the funding where we expect it to come from, because it might not all be combined authority funding.
Okay. Councillor Healy, still on great places for all.
Yes, supplementary to Councillor Widdowson, I think. If you're going to be adding more columns to this table, it would be useful to say what pot of money you're likely to be bidding against. Because I'm guessing, I don't know this for a fact, that the street lights would go against some sort of carbon zero type fund, and it wouldn't be going against the investment fund. And just as a sort of general question, has the mayor given any idea yet about how he's going to be divvying up the money between the two regions, either by population, by GVA? So, out of the 18 million a year, how much are we looking to realistically bid at?
Councillor Douglas, you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, on that, the specifics of it are still in play. After all, the election was on the 4th of May, and we're now at the beginning of June. So some of that is still coming through, but the conversations that we've had as lead members and started to have with the mayor and also with the officers is that we actually don't want to get into a position where we're bidding into pots, because that's what we're asked to do by national government. And it's a whole lot of effort and time from officers that doesn't necessarily mean that expense of people's time and effort is rewarded. And as a combined authority, clue is in the name, that we should be working together to identify where those priorities, and they should fit in with the mayor's personal priorities for the region as well. And it's not that the money is going to be divvied up according to population or any other particular measure, as I understand it at this point in time, but rather that there will be regional strategic priorities that we will look to develop together and hopefully come to an agreement as to how that will work. And there are areas of need and deprivation across the whole region that will need to be considered, for example, and other factors, connectivity, and that could be transport or digital connectivity, for example. So that need and strategic benefit is going to be really important. And I totally foresee that over the coming months, we will see that come out in more detail as everybody and the mayor gets settled into the work that they are doing. But the idea isn't that we are all going to spend hours and hours bidding for pots. You know, levelling up funds is a good example of how that didn't work for the regions. So trying not to go down that route.
Okay, thank you for that. Just a couple of comments from me on the Great Places for All. I think the line around air quality might benefit from a bit more detail in terms of what specific interventions this is looking at. Is it monitoring? Is it other interventions in rather than just monitoring air quality, actually specific actions to improve air quality at specific locations that might benefit from a bit of further detail. And then the Our City Centre line, the reference to Castle Gateway, we haven't had a sort of major project update on Castle Gateway at this committee for a while, primarily because we received an update and it was at a sort of a natural pause. It'd be useful to get an indication, depending on how this progresses, when would be an appropriate time for this committee to receive an update on that project. But just to flag that up. Councillor Burton.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to ask, is this purely about what we want funding, or is it just about priorities for what we want the mayor to work on? Because I was reflecting, I was originally going to raise the same point as Councillor Crawshaw about new build and not necessarily being something we should be investing in not retrofit, improved carbon for new build, because it should already be at that standard. But having sat on West Yorkshire Combined Authority, I guess they use their weight to encourage developers to introduce better standards without having to give the money directly for it. So do we see it happening both ways? Is this kind of what we're asking them to put priority towards rather than just money?
That's absolutely right, yeah.
Okay. Do any members have any other comments on the Great Places for All list? No. Okay. So we'll now move on to housing. Any comments or questions about this? Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. In the section about affordable key worker housing, it talks about the roles, the council's role as corporate parents. And they're obviously both very important issues, having affordable housing key workers and being corporate parents, but I wasn't sure exactly how they're linked. Like why they're under the same banner.
They're not linked in the sense that obviously key workers aren't necessarily part of our corporate parent obligation. So key workers have their own status, if you like. But when we're looking at key worker affordable housing schemes, there might be opportunity to say some of those units or those facilities or the way that we're approaching it has equal relevance for us as a corporate parent and considers what we do with people transitioning outside of domestic arrangements that allow for more independent living.
Yeah, I think they're both very important things and both need to be
split them
priorities, but I think the way it's written here is maybe a bit muddled. It
Okay,
kind of
we'll
conflates
split
them
them
a
out,
bit.
yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Councillor Burton.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think I've seen it in here. We've obviously got the new local plan coming into place, which will be some massive sites, especially the new garden villages. And I think we need to, well, us or the mayor needs to think about how we liaise with the people developing those sites, how we influence them and how we make sure we're unlocking them, because it includes our focus on purely affordable housing sites, but A lot of our affordable housing supply will be on those new garden villages that comes forward. So I think we need something in there about how do we actually support the development of the local plan as it comes through. Would be my comment.
Thank you. Councillor Coles.
This section doesn't have a green one in it. I just wondered whether you had any insight into which of those you thought were the perhaps first priority, or ones that you thought were early achievable ones, or ones that would be the priority for us.
Yeah, that hasn't fully been decided upon yet, but one thing that is going to be hugely important very early doors is to get the strategic partnership in place with Homes England for the region. And so that's basically the top housing strategy. So I think that likely is the quick win. Unfortunately, housing isn't always a quick win, but we're super keen to get on with it. And that strategic partnership is going to be hugely important.
Thank you. Councillor Crawshaw.
Not a question, it's just to update. I've had a message from Councillor Nelson, who unfortunately isn't going to be able to join us this evening. So if we could just record her apology, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Healy.
Councillor Coles asked my question first.
Right.
Right.
Never mind. Councillor Widdowson.
Again, go back to all the strategies that we've done and the projects that we've done, we've got a very good idea of what we want to do and in which priority we wish to do them. I was surprised to not see on this list the retrofit for the 7,500 council homes. So I would have thought that would be number one priority for our city in terms of what you said, Councillor Crawshaw, making sure that everybody's available, that they're healthy and all the rest of it. So that was, if we can put that on, I would be grateful, because I think that's really important. Another comment I'd have on here is regulatory powers. I don't understand that line. Generating our own regulatory powers about carbon emissions. I genuinely don't understand what that means.
We'll expand that next time we come in and meet you.
Are we even allowed to? Are we becoming
Sorry.
a police? Are we allowed to? Are we going to become a police force on whether you've got a wood burner, a condenser boiler or whatever else? It just seemed a bit strange.
Okay. We can.
I can answer it.
Like,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, so so currently, as you know, local authority doesn't have regulatory powers around rental agreements, rental regulations and enforcement. It's not to say that we would have, it's whether the mayor would have those powers and discharge them through to us. And if so, what that might look like. It's more around what can we do to encourage and accelerate private residential landlords to take on retrofit and sustainability measures, really, if anything.
Okay, just to build on that, that isn't how that reads. Because the second half of it reads about rental. The first bit is regulatory powers. So it's just, it needs some clarity.
Yeah. It's up to
Yeah, I think we're just getting some slightly confusing answers. We do currently have regulatory and enforcement powers around things like wood burners, for example. You're only allowed to fit certain types of wood burner that have certain emission thresholds. We've had a smoke-free zone in the city centre of York for 30, 40 years. We clearly have things within the planning authority in terms of what we expect in terms of, you know, carbon emissions during the construction process and levels of insulation and those sorts of things. So I'm slightly confused at the conversation between the both of you, suggesting that there aren't already regulatory things that would cover some of this. And I would have thought we would all be quite keen to look to make sure that we're using as many tools as we possibly can to try to deliver as low carbon as we possibly can for the future.
I would agree with you, Councillor Crawshaw, but the way that read to me is that we were going to have additional powers and that we were going to somehow become a police force doing other things that I wasn't sure what we were allowed to do and what we
So we-
weren't allowed to do.
I think that the point has been made and it can be clarified and expanded as necessary when we come back to the next iteration. Is that on the same point, councillor Melly?
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. Just a sort of clarification question, really. So on youth zones, is that referring to what's provided or supported by an organisation called Onside? Or is this, or does youth zone mean something different?
So it's picking up on Bradford, is that on site? Or, so Bradford have a strategy where they have a number of youth zones dotted across the local authority area, which basically provides a dedicated sort of community facility for young people that is appealing and attractive to young people and gives them various different support, leisure, cultural activities. And it's whether we could imitate a similar programme essentially.
Right.
I don't know who.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they cover Bradford, but they are dotted about. I think they've got about 14 in England. Anyway.
Okay. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick follow-up on the local plan. So I think that came into my head there. We have that ambition to increase affordable housing. While the local plan will do what we need to do from our side in terms of identifying sufficient housing sites across the city, that pipeline delivery will not be in the hands of the council. And we know that land bankers and developers do actually utilise supply to maintain high house prices as much as they do. I can't see anything in here that would look to see what can we do. And I'm not saying there is an easy answer, but we know developers will drip feed those sites through to keep house prices as high as they possibly can, which is not necessarily what we want as a city. Nothing in here seems to look into how we can start to do that. Obviously, compulsory purchase is not an ideal solution, but what are those answers to actually start to get those sites coming forward quicker and increasing that supply?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's something that you would like, if feasible, to see added.
I think it's sort of alluded to in that second one on page 18, the funding for capacity to develop a continuous pipeline of affordable housing. You identify York Central, but that's only one. The vast majority of those will be on sites owned by private developers. So it's how does that section should be expanded. So that's what we can do on York Central. What are our solutions on the other 20,000 homes owned by?
Yeah. That's fine.
Okay. Couple of comments from me. The housing strategy line, I think it'd probably be helpful to have an explicit reference to housing for older people. Obviously, we're an ageing society. We know there are pressures on the availability of retirement accommodation, care home accommodation, in order to, if that's available, potentially free up homes for the residents. I think it probably does warrant an explicit reference in its own right, just so it makes the point of where it is an issue where we are concerned about. And the second one was about regional skills learning centre. So we talk about an adult skills hub, a business case for an adult skills hub.
Yeah.
I know anybody who's spoken to anyone from York Learning will know that they're very, very, very keen to have premises. Is that what that's referring to? Because I'm guessing it is, but I just wanted to double check that was.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Anyone else have anything to say about the housing table? No. Okay, so we move on to well-connected economy. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. This might not be the document for this, but because it might just be something that the mayor has to drive within their own team. But I wondered if bus franchising should have any place in this. Is that premature? Is it the right place? I don't know, but I know but we've had a lot of stuff go through council on this that most of us have voted in favour of, and that there is a power available. Maybe it's not the right place, but
Yeah.
throw it out there.
I'm sure it's on a list somewhere. But,
It's on the mayor, it's a mayoral
Yeah.
responsibility.
It's a power that's wholly delegated to him. And I think this is us asking of him. So it's probably on a different list.
Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. The whole first page of this section, all of page 19, is all just different transport initiatives, projects, interventions that are all come under the same York ambitions of climate change strategy, economic strategy, joint health and wellbeing strategy, and local transport strategy. I think that the movement in place plan should also be there. I think that the movement in place plan should also be in that list of York strategies and policies that we should be trying to achieve, and that these things need to fit with. And so, yeah, this is my supplementary kind of question from earlier, because you were saying that you'd like input from this committee of what the priorities should be, but I don't feel like as a committee we can do that yet, because the movement in place plan is still being developed, and that will prioritise. That will give us a strategic view of what the priorities should be. So how has this list of what the priorities should be been developed when the work is still ongoing to actually find the priority?
This list was developed in consultation with Highways Agency and DFT, and it was at the start of developing the local transport strategy, which was, as you know, sort of 12 months ago or so. And since then, as you say, the movement and place plan has come in, and work is underway with that already. And I think it's going to executive in July. Yeah, it's going to executive in July. So you're absolutely right. The movement and place plan sits above it all, and we need to reflect that in this list.
So, what's the timeline in terms of when you need to know what the priorities are, and when this is going to EPAT, and when this list needs to be finalised? Can we wait until the movement and place plan is done to know what should be prioritised to be on this list?
We'll need to check that with the combined authority, but we're working with the combined authority to talk about the movement and place plan as well. So hopefully the two things will come together, but I can't say that for sure. So let us take that away.
Yeah, I just, as a committee, you know, here today in this meeting, I don't see how we can say yes to any of these specific things being a priority before we have that plan.
Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, also, I think we should remember that for some areas more than others, it will be a live document, and our priorities for various reasons may change over time for the unforeseen opportunity or things that happen that we're not expecting. So it's really important that we do get something through to the mayor as soon as we possibly can, but also on the understanding that there may be adjustments that are made to that over time, and should our situation change, it wouldn't be unexpected that we could go back and say, you know, this now has raised its priority because of X. So these in the transport area, these are generally things that we've been talking about doing for a very long time, but totally appreciate, you know, the prioritising of when they actually happen needs to reflect that policy as well, which shouldn't be too long in the making, I hope.
Thank you. Councillor Merritt.
Couple of things on here. On the sustainable transport one, it refers to the three biggest major sites in the local plan. But actually, there are a number of other peripheral sites in the local plan which will have transport challenges in terms of getting good public transport links. So I wonder if that's been defined a little bit too narrowly. So I think that's one thing I'd like to flag. Further down the list is the charging issue. About a quarter of York's residential properties are in terraced areas, predominantly in and around the city centre. And if we are going to decarbonise transport, then we need to look beyond the two areas that are listed to see if we can actually find better solutions for the terraced areas where it's not possible for people to individually charge from their premises because of the pavements in between and no off-street parking. Finally, on the rail issue, I'm not disagreeing with the three that are there, but I was wondering about the last one, the rail network, whether that's basically just looking at the existing or whether we actually, you know, the mayor needs to look at the wider picture. You know, with Transport for the North and so on, you've had pressures from the existing mayoral authorities feeding into their plans. We've not had the equivalent from York and North Yorkshire in terms of trying to influence that strategy for the North to pick up our own sub-regions' interests. And I wonder if there's a piece of work that needs to be done there to do that. And in terms, you know, so Leeds has been merrily advocating its case in terms of its linkages, strategic linkages, Manchester and down to Sheffield and so on. I think there's a piece of work that needs to be done about York's linkages.
Okay.
And North Yorkshire's.
So 3 points. So the first about the listing of some of the strategic housing sites, but not all. Point around e-charging, which at a recent Economy in Place Access Transport Committee we had a very detailed discussion on. I can't remember whether you were. I don't think you were at that. But yeah, we did have quite a useful discussion. And then finally about feeding into sort of pan-North rail network strategy priorities. Who'd like to pick up those? Councillor Douglas?
Yeah, I can tell you what has been going on, and of course the money that's come through into the region from the scrapping of HS2 and the potential there for reinvestment into the existing rail network. Now you're absolutely right. The focus within the pan-regional rail work has been around Leeds and West Yorkshire, and there certainly is more work that needs to be done on that, and that's one of the benefits of having the mayoral combined authority to represent us in that respect now. But on the element that you raised, Councillor Merritt, about the provide funding to support rail services that have been lost and stalled over the last 2-3 years. So we've lost frequency in some areas, and that actually continues because the rail network still hasn't fully recovered really from COVID. But then there's also the potential for increased frequency of service that hasn't existed for a very long time, and that would be, for example, half-hourly service to between Scarborough and York. So there's quite a lot of work around that, and then off into West Yorkshire and down to Selby as well, and request for electrification to fill in some of the gaps that we've got as well. But you know all the details of this, so you likely know more about it than I do. But yes, absolutely, those conversations being had.
Thank you. Do you, and in terms of the other points raised around the strategic housing sites that are named in the e-charging, if you can take those away and just have a look at those. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. So on page 19, at the bottom, actually, just strategic road capital upgrades. There's 3 there. There's the dualling stage 1 and dualling stage 2. I'm just curious if the word overspend is on there, and then obviously the capital, and then could you just explain why there's what the overspend, what that means, and are we expecting money from the mayor to cover that overspend? And I'm just curious as to why that wording is in there.
Yeah, that's correct. To cover the predicted overspend on the A19 to Hopgrove dualling stage. I'm afraid I can't answer what stage that's at already, so I'll have to come back to you as to whether it has been overspent or whether it's been predicted to be overspent.
I'm guessing that when the initial costings were drawn up, that was when inflation was lower, and just guessing that that's what that relates to. Councillor Eyre.
Yeah, it's just alerted me to something else. Just over the page, the A64 upgrading A19, A64 Fulford Junction. I think going back to Councillor Corshaw's much earlier point, that was part of the strategic housing development, I think. And to be careful that we're not stepping in and picking up the cost that developers should be doing in terms of some of these schemes.
Yeah, we'll take that back and check it against US 106 and things like that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
It's the massive new housing development that's in the local plan.
Councillor Merritt.
Nigel's, Councillor Ayres sort of prompted me on that same one. About a decade ago, there was a pinch point scheme for that junction in terms of improving bus priorities, which was only partly implemented at the time. Is that part of this? Because there is an issue with a number of the outer ring road A64 junctions that suffer significant queuing, and there's no effective priority for getting public transport through that or past the congestion that would actually make it a much more reliable and attractive alternative.
Yeah, if you can take that away, that would be helpful. Comment from me on public transport enhancements row, where, to pick up Councillor Taylor's point, I see franchising gets a mention, but the text is very small, so you might struggle to see it. I'm concerned the way it's worded, we could be closing off opportunities for investment in other forms of publicly accessible transport over and above traditional bus services. So thinking about community transport. For some residents, getting to a bus stop precludes them from using the bus, and there are other options that are better suited to them. So I think if we can word it in a way that doesn't preclude potential investment in community transport offers that I know have been in operation in other parts of the region to greater or lesser degrees of success, but just so we don't close off that opportunity. Okay, anything else on well-connected economy? No. Yeah, Councillor Rowley, yeah.
My question earlier about the West York, North Yorkshire, is that?
Yeah.
Coming to that next.
We've spoken to West Yorkshire Combined Authority is the bottom answer. So we've already had that conversation about how we can work together. We haven't had that conversation with East Yorkshire, so we'll take that away, Councillor Rowley, and add it into this and begin those conversations.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so in terms of looking for funding from the Mayor of York and North Yorkshire, is this additional funding to what we've received from West Yorkshire, or it's the funding side I'm not quite sure about?
Oh, so this is funding from York and North Yorkshire Mayor Combined Authority to help us to build essentially marketing offer between us and West Yorkshire to try and create that kind of flow. But that's because we've started to talk to them about LVIPs and things like that. What we need to do is start having similar conversation with East Yorkshire. So we'll add that into the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we will move on to productive and innovative economy. We have some green splashes on this table. So the first question I had was reading the first line. There's a lack of strategic employment land within the City of York Council area. I wondered whether that was a comment on the draft local plan or whether it reflects a situation that the local plan seeks to address. It just seemed I couldn't quite get my head around why that would be the opening gambit, and whether it is a comment on the draft local plan or not.
It's not a criticism of the local plan. We wouldn't dream to do that. It was actually looking at whether there's any other sites that we can make better use of, essentially. So potentially brownfield or other sites that became available. I mean, as it was, when this was initially written, a site did become available that hadn't been identified in the local plan, but that's been since withdrawn. So it was, yeah.
Okay. It may be open to a number of interpretations, so maybe it just needs to be reworded a bit. Councillor Douglas?
Yeah, there's a general understanding that we need to accelerate the availability of land for employment for those purposes. So it's doing what we can as quickly as possible in conjunction with the regional partners in order to bring that through, because we've got some economic opportunities coming up now. So we need to move quite quickly.
Thank you. Councillor Burton.
Yeah, thank you. Just a comment around kind of the skills element. The wording feels quite focused towards, still a little bit towards young people coming through education or people who've left maybe the care setting and moving into adult life, whereas obviously this is the adult education budget comes on board with them, and there's a lot of people who are adults who would benefit from being upskilled as part of the green economy, adults who would benefit being upskilled as part of the kind of tech economy that moves through, adults who are neat, who've been left behind and are disenfranchised. I think it's just, can we look at tweaking that wording to bring that kind of more to the forefront with the adult education budget that we have.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other comments from members on productive and innovative economy section? Councillor Heath.
More of a question, really.
Move your paper away from the mic.
Okay, sorry. Second one down, the one Councillor Burton was just referring to. What differentiates a green construction skills village from the activities that are already done at York College?
So essentially, as I understand it, and do stop me if anybody's got more, but my understanding is a green construction skills village is essentially a building site that allows people to build, retrofit and test retrofit skills in real life, in situ, rather than in the classroom or in like little tiny, little small sort of scenarios and tableaus. So things like passive house building skills, insulation skills in actual real life and in a proper building, if you like, that's being constructed.
Thank you. Just an observation, not, just something that I think potentially could be considered for addition is some reference to the voluntary community and social enterprise sector in terms of the work that they do with adults who are outside of the sort of traditional employment market. I know the sector is very keen to be heard and for their contribution to be valued. I think particularly in the scope of access to employment, that might be something that I wouldn't want it to be seen as a deliberate omission, which I'm sure it isn't, but I think if it can be reflected somewhere in here, I think that would be helpful. Any other comments or questions or observations? Councillor Eyre.
I'm not sure if this is the right section or not, but just off the back of what you said as well, I'm thinking of the social care sector as well is a particular area that we're going to be struggling to recruit to. So if we're focusing on an area, that might be something to include. Again, giving you solutions, giving you problems that don't necessarily have solutions, but it should definitely be a priority to see what we can do to improve levels of employment in social care. I mean, the figures that nationally they're talking about is ridiculous to get that, but it should at least be something that we're thinking, what is it that we can do? We've obviously got the key worker housing type of thing, but if anything else that we can do to encourage people to enter that sector.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, and that particular issue, as with construction skills, to be frank. It's regional, it's pan-regional, it's national, isn't it? And so I think that is definitely worth taking forward to the mayor as something that we likely should be doing in conjunction with North Yorkshire too, because the scale aspect on the care industry is just absolutely huge for everybody. So I'll definitely take that forward too.
And equally working together to avoid competition, because the last thing we want to be doing is recruiting and training social workers who then go and work for North Yorkshire and Leeds. And as much as it's good to have to be exchanging skills, but to work together so that we're not competing with each other in the same market.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other comments on this, obviously, initial canter through this list? Who knows what the other scrutiny committees will will put forward, but hopefully they'll have other ideas and suggestions that can be fed in. Councillor Douglas.
And just to summarise, and thank you for the input from everybody on that. It's really helpful. But I think what we shouldn't forget, and all of us should keep our kind of minds alert to, is this is really based on what we know the potential opportunity is at this point in time. But as the combined authority matures more, then we should have more access to central government funding as well for different initiatives and also private investment. And so it likely will be that we come back time and time again and look at different aspects of what we possibly can do through the combined authority. So it would be good to have a review of this on a regular basis, I think, and look at the opportunities that are arising and what we can all take forward together. I think be really helpful.
Thank you. I think we're all kind of getting our heads around how this will work in practice, because obviously it's something that's new, and yes, we do want to put our best foot forward in terms of York's needs, but also conscious of the need for collaborative working, obviously within the combined authority region and beyond, given our interdependencies. So thank you, members. Thank you, officers, for providing the report. We'll see you in July on the other side. Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 5, which is work plan. You'll see we have another meeting, 8th of July, where we have a fairly busy agenda. I think the main item for discussion will be the corporate improvement framework, which is coming here for some pre-decision scrutiny. So it's a fairly busy looking agenda. Oh, I'm told the finance and performance outturn 23-24 won't be coming to the July meeting because it will not have gone to executive by that point. So we're looking at September, October. That seems quite a long time after the end of the financial year, but we can pick that up offline, see if there are any opportunities for us to see that. So presumably we'll have the Q1 before. Okay, right. October will be busy finance discussion. It does seem a bit odd, but we can discuss that offline. In terms of other agenda items, I circulated a couple of weeks ago our list of potential topics with an invitation to officers to indicate whether my guesstimates as to when would be the best time to bring those items to committee was accurate or not. I think we've had some responses, but not everybody has responded. No. We've had a few responses, so we'll start scheduling a forward plan of agenda items on the back of that feedback, and Councillor Merritt and I will discuss that, and if we do need to escalate any sort of non-responses, then we can look to do that. So I'm conscious that we don't just take items in a random fashion, but try and schedule those items when we can, yeah, the discussion we have can have most benefit in terms of informing decisions or policy formulation. But I will also be guided by officer availability as well, as we try to do. Any more comments on forward plan? No, work plans. Great. So there is no urgent business. So that concludes the meeting, and thank you for your attendance. Good night.